Dedications. Okay, if anyone wants to add dedications, so dedications to the soldiers fighting the war. May they be protected and be victorious in destroying the enemy. And we hope all the hostages return safely and in reasonable health. And also for Refuah Shlema for Yerachmiel ben Chana and for Leah Bat Esther. Any other names that you guys have for Refuah Shlema?
Leah Masha Basara.
And Arthur and Gavin, any names that you have?
No, not that I can think of. No, thank you.
Okay, so I'll be very brief. Drop my bookmark. This parasha, as I mentioned, the last 2 days has got some very interesting things in it and events. And one of the main events, the main story, should we say, is the Jacob preparing to meet Esav and doing the hishtadlut. But before he does that, he's sleeping in the open. He goes, I think he went to retrieve something. He left behind while his family was ahead. And he got attacked by the angel of Esav. And it's very interesting, very strange actually, that he fights the angel of Esav, hits him on the sciatic nerve, which is in the hind quarter, the back of the leg. And that's the reason we don't eat the hind quarter. Well, kosher meat doesn't allow because you can't remove that sciatic nerve. But the point I wanted to discuss is Jacob gets injured by this angel. Then Jacob says to him, "Please bless me." And the angel says no and goes away. And it's just so weird. Why would you want someone who claps you or who injures you physically or psychologically? Why would you want to have anything to do with them? So this is just a weird. I didn't find any commentary on that. I mean, I haven't found anything yet on that, but it's just strange that he asks him to bless him and then he changes his name to Yisrael. So from that moment on, he's called Yisrael. He's still called Yaakov, but he's known as Yisrael. But he asks him to bless him after he gets injured by him, which is very strange. There's a strange subplot of that story.
So I just wanted to explain to you one or two aspects on that, if I may, for a minute, Kabb, is that there are opinions that it's almost the equivalent of you entering a martial arts tournament and you fighting somebody that, although they're your opponent, you both are on the same page technically, because what the Satan, the spiritual impediment, works for Hashem. It's an angel that works for Hashem. And what Hashem wants us to do, as the Ramchal said, is overcome our naturally difficult obstructions that are separating us from Hashem and master the self. And therefore, the job of that malach is to get us to sin, and it's fulfilling its obligation. It is still a servant of Hashem. And therefore, it's the equivalent, the analogy given of a king who wants his son, who is prince, to take over the throne as the father's getting quite old. And he says to the person in charge, he said, "I want you to tempt my son with hot women. I want you to tempt my son in all sorts of arenas with money deals. If he has integrity, or he'd sell resources that belong to the country for self-gain, like Zuma and the ANC do. And at the end of the day, this person has to do their best, although it doesn't want their son to fail, to see if his son's up to the challenge of rulership. And therefore, it's not like this person was opposing Israel, Yaakov, who became Israel. In fact, at the end of the day, he wanted blessing, because the blessing was almost an opponent that you defeat and has great respect for you, who really wants you to win, but who is in superior skill. We're certainly at the same level of skill, and there's a sportsmanship involved of wanting to foster Yaakov's growth. And
Yeah,
while we're on
Scott.
the question of
The Mishnah discusses the case of someone who recognizes his stolen property in the hands of others. If one recognizes his utensils and he looks, can't see properly, and his books in the possession of another, and a report of burglary concerning him was circulated in the city, the alleged purchaser must return the property to the claimant and swear to him how much he paid, and he takes that amount from the claimant. But if not, if no report of theft had been circulated, the claimant is not believed to say that the objects were stolen, for I say that he sold them to another and this person purchased them from him.
okay, good, very well read. All right. So if Reuven recognizes that Shimon has his property and said Shimon didn't steal it from him, but Shimon bought it from a thief. In other words, he recognizes either his utensils, his jewels, his books, something that is pretty unique to him, and it's got maybe markings, for example, or even if he just knows that his books went missing and his goods went missing, and they're in the possession of another person. What's this report of burglary concerning him that was circulated in the city? So basically, before the owner, in this case Reuven, despaired of retrieving his property, he said that he saw it in the possession of Shimon, for example, because Shimon had bought it from the robber. Now, generally, a person who has movable property in his possession is not suspected, guys, of having obtained it by illegal means. Therefore, even if witnesses testify that the goods in Shimon's possession once belonged to Reuven, Shimon, guys, is actually believed to say that he purchased them either from Reuven directly or any other third party who presumably might have bought them from Reuven. So Reuven cannot claim that Shimon or the person who sold the goods to Shimon stole them from him. You can't automatically claim that. In our Mishnah's case, however, since it was common knowledge that there was a burglary in Reuven's house, either by the fact that there were rumors that went around, or there was a community notice board in the shul that said that this has been stolen, have you seen it? We therefore accept Reuven's claim that the articles were stolen, because that had to have transpired before, some form of evidence or notification. So Shimon, this is the part you've got to bear in mind. He's not actually suspected of being a thief. Rather, guys, we assume that he bought the items from someone who in fact had stolen them from Reuven. So hence Shimon must return them to Reuven, and this is the most important part. He is compensated for his loss. Since Reuven didn't despair of retrieving the articles, they still belong to Reuven. And although there was a change of domain from the thief to Shimon, without Yeush, it does not affect acquisition. Now, there's a point that you might want to say. So if it still belongs,
why are you paying?
Why are you paying? So that's an excellent question. So exactly as Gavin said, it's difficult to understand why Shimon enjoys the right to compensation, because in view of the fact that the items still belong to Reuven, why should Reuven have to pay for them? So guys, there are two possible explanations, and I want you to hear where it's coming from. It makes total sense. Number one of the plausibilities is that since the buyer did not steal anything from the owner, the latter has no legal claim against him. It was actually the thief who deprived him of his possessions and not the buyer. The buyer bought it legit. He bought it from the market. Accordingly, although the owner is entitled to return of his property, he might, for example, have his late mother that has given him the, what do you call it, the family heirloom, and it means a lot to him from a sentimental point of view. He can't require the buyer to suffer a loss on his behalf, so he must therefore compensate the buyer. Sometimes a cell phone is a perfect example. It's got all your WhatsApp on and all your personal messages. And in that particular case, it obviously means a lot to the person to where money is worth paying for. There's a second explanation. This is quite interesting. Is that in fact, the owner actually does have a legal claim against the buyer. As long as the owner has not despaired of recovering his stolen goods, anyone holding on to them is effectively depriving him from them, and therefore can be considered a thief. Although he didn't actually steal them from him, but he innocently purchased them in the marketplace, they're still depriving him of his items and have taken it without his consent. So that's known as thievery. There's a difference between premeditated thievery and the buyer buying stolen goods. So consequently, under biblical law, the buyer must return the stolen goods without compensation. That's derisive biblical law. But the rabbi said, listen, we have to have something to soften the blow. And they passed this law, which is known as Tikanat Hashuk. Shuk is a marketplace. Tikanat is from the word tikon, is to fix up. So it's basically translated in colloquial English as the rectification or the remedy of the marketplace. And what that does do, Gavin, is it protects the innocent buyer of stolen goods by requiring the owner to compensate him for his loss. Make sense?
Yeah, there's a slight problem I have with that, is that firstly, I think that the problem is they can, they can be in cahoots. It's open to abuse. So what happens is two robbers can steal it. The one can be the original thief. The other one could pretend like he bought it. He didn't actually buy it. The other one just handed it to him, and then he's paid. He's actually paid for stolen stuff. So that's a problem. And the other thing is, if it is legit, let's say they're not in cahoots and the guy did buy it in the marketplace and it's stolen, then I think the guy who bought it, even though it's innocently, has recourse against the guy that he bought it from, the buyer. But he shouldn't have to, he shouldn't get compensated for by the original owner. I think the original owner should never pay. That would be my humble opinion.
No, so this is so what you are saying, let me just see if I understand you correctly. There are two problems. The one is that there are two thieves, and the one says he bought it from a guy at the marketplace, and at the end of the day, if he gets compensated, he's basically earning money without doing any jail time. I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah, that's the one point I'm making.
Okay, so to address that particular point, one of the things that you've got to bear in mind, just stop the screen share. One of the things that you've got to bear in mind is that there's certain parts that probably take place in a courtroom. One of them is that there has to be there might be in a marketplace a case where a person can't just set up shop. I'm just thinking here. In other words, if you want to rent for in Sandton City or you want to rent in Shuk, you've got to give your name, your ID number, because at the end of the day, you could have somebody that just steals for a living and sells at the marketplace, and then they have this drama all the time. So it might have to be where they actually provide certain forms of identification, including name, reputation, references, address, ID numbers, in order to operate in the place. And that although they can sell it on the side of the street, one might be encouraged to buy from legitimate vendors to weed out these sort of problems. So you can buy things with a guarantee. So there are certain implementation that I think would be done as a tenant of the marketplace. If I owned a shuk or a shopping center, to ensure to deal with a tenant who is of reputable quality and not sully the reputation of our shopping center. This is just my suggestion, Gavin. It might be based on rubbish.
No, I think it's. I would do that too. I would definitely have proof of residency and ID and all that type of stuff. All that type of stuff is absolutely critical, especially for something like that.
Correct.
Just to legitimize the marketplace so that they can backtrack
exactly.
it.
Then you've got 2 or 3 other procedures that would hold in good stead. The other one would be taking a shavua, an oath with Hashem's name by certain parties, and people are very, at the time of the Gemara, people were very nervous to use Hashem's name in vain and swear. You know, you might say, but if a person's a thief, why would they be scared to use Hashem's name? And people are funny creatures. We learned of that case where somebody could be a killer or thief, but doesn't want to use, they don't want to use teruma. That's not allowed for a non-Kohen. People are strange.
And Gavin,
yeah, sorry.
Gavin, the way you sound, that sounds like he wrote the script for Ocean's 11. You know, they still have a sting.
Yeah, so they set up a sting. So the two other issues, Gavin. So the one is the protective measures that a shopping center or marketplace would have before you become a tenant. The second aspect would be a shavua. In other words, you can't just buy something without getting a kabla, a receipt, and without having the receipt of a tenant in the shopping center that has a traceable track record. If you want to be stupid enough to buy something on the side of the road, then the court might turn around and say that since the purchaser cannot in turn sue the shop owner to get his money back, or since the original owner cannot sue to get his money back, there's a problem. Because we did learn a Mishnah where you have got a choice to sue the thief should his identity become available, or the buyer. Okay, but what happens in that particular case is that you might want to sue them for money, but it might be more important to you to keep that family heirloom of something a late parent gave you and pay the money over, but you still might have legal recourse, Gavin, to sue the shop owner who suddenly got those goods in his hands. You might be able to have a counterclaim. We don't know. That legal.
That's what I was alluding to. Yeah.
Okay, so that was your first question. I hope I answered it. What was your second question?
You know, that's the problem. I was hoping you would keep track of everything.
So your second question, from what I understood, is
it will come back to me. Just give me an idea, and I'll.
Okay. The second question is that
the owner must never. The owner should never reimburse the guy in the middle, the buyer who bought from the market, because I don't think the onus is on him. I think he should get the article for free. That's my opinion, and then the buyer should go back to the market and get a refund because it's stolen.
So
he probably won't get, but
the only way they can be a counterclaim is to exactly say what you said. Look, you might want that I have to give it back to you. That's fine, and the court might force me to do it. But as the buyer, I'm out of pocket, which means it's not going to rectify problems in the marketplace in terms of guarantees. So it's going to have an impact on financially on all shopping centers or consumer-driven venues. So that also has to be taken into account as a financial remedy. So we're not saying, though, that if you get compensated for the buy by getting your cash back, and by the way, in order to get your cash back, you have to use the shavua with Hashem's name, how much you paid for it. You can't invent your own amount. But assuming you get it back, then the buyer has to have bought it from somebody, and they have to disclose where they bought it. They might not be able to get their cash back if they can't say where they bought it, because they might be corroborating with purchasing illegal stolen goods. At which, if they can corroborate where they bought it from, the original owner could have a cash claim back against the store owner. Okay, so we don't know. So let's just go on in the Gemara. So it says, and a report of burglary concerning him was circulated in the city. So the alleged purchaser must return the property to the claimant and swear to him how much he paid, and he takes that amount from the claimant. So we did say there has to be a shavua opening Hashem's name. But if not, in other words, if there was no report of theft that had circulated in community notices, okay, the claimant isn't believed, Gavin, to say that the object was stolen, because I could say that he had buyer's remorse. According to the Mishnah, he said, for I say that he sold them to another, and this person purchased them from him. Meaning that we assume that Reuven sold those items to someone who subsequently sold them to Shimon. Reuven regretted the sale and invented this tale of theft in order to retrieve his property. Shimon, therefore, is under no obligation to return the goods. So the only time he's believed from the Mishnah is if there was a report of burglary circulating in the city. Now, it's going to obviously address a point that's saying maybe there was buyer's remorse, and maybe at that point he circulated a report of robbery in order to get his stuff back, even if he paid for it. Why? Because he regretted the sale. Maybe he was short of cash, he sold family heirlooms, and then felt afterwards rather bad at giving back his taking money for his grandfather's watch, and therefore he wanted to give the buyer compensation, but just at the end of the day get back his family heirlooms because some money came through for him. So the Gemara starts this question and it says, look, at the end of the day, even if the report of theft concerning him circulated in the city, so what of it, guys? That's what the Gemara says. Let us suspect that perhaps he sold the objects and it is he who disseminated the report. Why? Because as a rule, we don't believe someone's claim that the property in another's possession was stolen from him. So how does a mere rumor of burglary or just a notification give credence to his claim? After all, it's possible that the claimant came into some money and he sold it under financial duress, and he regretted that he had to sell his possessions, therefore started the rumor himself, or the report. And the Gemara says, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, the Mishnah refers to a case where people came into his house. And in other words, guests stayed overnight in his house. And what actually ended up happening is he got up in the middle of the night and shouted, my utensils have been stolen. Okay? So, in other words, there were witnesses that saw this commotion. And the Gemara counters and says, listen, in that case, we should certainly suspect that he found a pretext to recover his utensils. In other words, maybe after regretting the sale of his possessions and finding out that the buyer had sold them to another person, the original owner devised this like charade, right? Of inviting people to stay over for Shabbos and getting up and ranting and yelling in the middle of the night so that they're going to believe him when he later claims that his possessions were stolen. That's according to Rashi. So the Gemara says you're going to have to do a little bit of that. So the Gemara says, look, this answer is incomplete because if you look at what Rav Kahana concluded of the preceding statement, he said in the name of Rav as follows: this is a case where, in addition to his getting up and shouting in the middle of the night, there was actually evidence that a tunnel was dug in his house. And the people who were staying the night in his house exited with bundles of utensils on their shoulders. And everybody, the rest of the guests, were saying, hey, so-and-so have been, utensils have been stolen. In other words, there's, you could actually see that they left a tunnel they made in the wall, possibly because they had no other way of leaving the house without being detected. So it has some form of evidence. Okay? Now the Gemara processor said, but maybe you can say, okay, there was a genuine robbery. But now the person's getting on the bandwagon, Kevin, and he's saying, listen, guess what was stolen? It wasn't only books, it was utensils. It was a TV set, it was this and that. You know, so granted the scenario corroborates his claim that utensils were stolen, But it doesn't demonstrate anything about his honesty or what exactly was stolen. He could use this genuine theft as an opportunity to claim a whole lot of things, laptops, TVs, etc. So the Gemara says, Rav Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rav Yochanan, the cases where the people of the city were saying that books had also been stolen, meaning that this guy wasn't overclaiming. He was saying, listen, I have in a Chumash 5 sets of books on Moses. These 2 books were missing, and Cantilibra was missing. Guys, you saw that I had it on Friday night in the table, and it's not there, but nothing else was missing. In other words, he's not going over the top, and it can be seen. So the Gemara is saying, but should we suspect that perhaps the burglars were carrying small books when in fact he's claiming large books? So in other words, even this evidence fails to support Reuven's claim that the specific books in Shimon's possession were the ones stolen from him. Perhaps other books had been stolen, whereas the ones in Shimon's possession had been sold by Reuven. Okay, so what it's saying is, yeah, the guy's claiming that he's got a 8K television set of high resolution. Might have one of those Kaki Sonys back from 1984. Meaning, yeah, TV was stolen, but it was one of those pregnant TVs, not the 8K ones that you can see every hair on a person's arm, and it has that high definition. So the Gemara says, listen, is it necessary to go into such detail? Meaning, it can't be necessary for the people of the city to know I had a whole inventory. Oh, he took this book. Oh, he took that book. Oh, he took that. I mean, how do we know such a thing? So the Gemara asks, maybe he needed money and sold his books and utensils. In other words, although the person doesn't usually sell his utensils, it's possible that a financial crisis forced him to do so. Hence, in his case as well, we should require that people know which specifics were stolen. And then the Gemara answers, Rav Ashi said, why a report of burglary concerning him was circulating in the city, and that actually should suffice in the case of one who does not usually sell his possessions. Why? Because since his claim is corroborated by the report, since he generally doesn't sell his possessions, he doesn't, he's quite attached to them. We have sufficient evidence to assume that the books and utensils found in Shimon's possession are indeed taken from Reuven's house. Okay.
Why don't they both take the oath? The owner and the guy who bought it at the marketplace.
So I actually think that's a reasonable assumption, and I would actually go with it. I would go with what you're saying, that they probably both have to take it.
Yeah, it would make more sense, because then you've got a little bit more comfort that one of them is at least telling the truth, because they obviously, one of them's lying.
Yeah. So that to me makes
no. They can both be telling the truth, because the one bought it from the market, which is true, and the owner it was stolen from him, so it's all true. So they can both take the oath, and they're both telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, but I think an oath would be a good default position.